So Cecil, did you have any idea that guys like you and I are part of a cult?
Well, if you consider us a cult of horror film freaks, then sure. Why not?
Damn right.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Horror Show. I'm Cecil Laird.
I mean, Fuego here.
And we are here to review yet another movie out of the 2019 Phoenix Film Festival Subdivision International Horror and Sci-Fi Film Festival. Now, we're gonna have a lot of these reviews coming at you guys pretty soon, so, and we're gonna really test out these mics with the wind right now, so hopefully it's still okay, but angle towards me a little bit more, because that might shield the wind too.
Yes.
Fuego, what are we gonna be talking about this time?
We are talking about a documentary all about cult film called Survival of the Film Freaks.
Right. Now, this is just a straight up documentary that was, I don't remember exactly how long it was, maybe an hour 40, something like that.
Maybe even less than that, yeah. So nothing like Never Sleep Again, comprehensive
like
or anything of that.
Sleep Again. But this, when we first saw the trailer for this, or at least when we first heard about it, I got the idea that it was going to be like this other documentary that's going to be coming out soon, the one that's all about the 80s. This isn't specifically about the 80s. This one is specifically about cult film. And not just cult horror film. There are other cult films that they touch on, although it is mostly geared towards horror movies.
Yeah, horror, but also like grindhouse and all the weird subgenres of like borderline and sometimes even exploitation filmmaking that, and they basically trace its origins in the late 60s, early 70s, decade by decade, how everything changed through advents of technology and things like that, and take it all the way up to the modern day where it's still being made, so.
Yeah. Now, we'll do this review like we normally do them, our overall thoughts. We'll talk about the story. Can't really talk about the acting or the effects or anything like that.
Yeah.
We can talk about the editing and whatnot.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought that overall this was an interesting documentary. It was not the most entertaining documentary, but it was interesting. I didn't find all of the people that they got for the documentary that engaging. Some of them kind of rubbed me the wrong way.
A little bit for me too.
Yeah, for whatever reason. So I was like, when they were on screen, it was a little bit of a cringe fest, but ultimately it was still a really coherent presentation. Although, what I mean by coherent presentation is it was easy to follow and everything, but what I will say, one of my gripes as I was watching it is it didn't feel like there was as much of a centralized arc that we were following throughout the movie, like there was sort of in the Kane Hodder documentary, or even in the Never Sleep Again, which was obviously just going from movie to movie and stuff like that. This one just felt like a lot of people just kind of reminiscing about cult film, and then they eventually made it to what cult film's like nowadays. And there was no real bridges or things like that in at least from what I could tell. I don't know. Am I wrong? So overall, I liked it, but I just wasn't blown away by it.
Yeah, I wasn't particularly blown away, but I don't know if I would contend the same gripes. I mean, it's a very just simple story of how cult filmmaking changed over the decades, and I felt it had a narrative that was mildly engaging.
How it changed though?
Maybe it was more so that not so much the sensibilities of how it was made, but I feel more so like how it was distributed and how people discovered it. I felt like it was much more so about that, because they're like, first it was in the theaters, and that's where people would have to go to these midnight showings to find this sort of stuff. And this is kind of a segue into storytelling. I will agree with you that I liked it, but I didn't love it. I wasn't blown away. It wasn't an immense amount of stuff that I didn't really know already, but yeah, so it starts in the theaters with the fact that after the whole counterculture movement in the late 60s and the early 70s, and civil justice being sought after and equal rights and all of these different things, there were so many jaded people that were still hanging around after that movement. They're like, how can we just express that we're still pissed off and just really, I don't know, can't seem to figure ourselves out? Well, let's express it through filmmaking, and whether it's biker cinema, whether it's trash cinema, whether it's violent, whatever, you had to initially go to these midnight screenings to find it at first, and then with the advent advent of cable and home video, it was easier to discover, and that's how people like us who grew up in the 80s, were able to find it. And then as things changed into, DVD and then Blu-ray, which they don't really touch on Blu-ray at all in this, which I thought was interesting. They talked about just the advent of DVD and getting.
And they have the perfect guy to talk about it too.
Yeah, exactly. The guy from Scream and Shout Factory. Because those guys are notorious now for very expensive but really nicely put together deluxe editions for genre films, I guess you could say. But and then they segue eventually into streaming and piracy and how that helped and yet hindered at the same time. And so I felt like it was a very simple story that they were trying to tell, and it wasn't always compelling, but I feel like it wasn't always compelling because, like you said, there were certain people that they brought in that I just didn't find as engaging. I found them more like, oh, the good old days were so great, everybody has it so easy now. I was part of the cool kids back, before it was cool and everybody could find it. And so there was kind of an elitist mentality from some of these people that they interviewed, which really bugged me a little bit.
Yeah, so. Again, like I said, rubbed me the wrong way at times, but it was still, again, I did appreciate the trip down nostalgia lane, you know what I mean? Like, they showed clips of some movies, I'm guessing the ones they were able to obtain the rights for, and then just posters of others, which were still nostalgic in and of themselves. In fact,
the VHS cover art.
Throughout the credits, the end credits, they just blast up, old nostalgic, good, box cover art and stuff like that for cult movies. So it was a really, the nice thing about it is that it's basically an hour-and-a-half long discussion about something that usually it's just you and I or our people in our circle discussing, so it's nice to see writ large on a big screen, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and it was cool to see some of our heroes, because I guess the only extent of acting we get, if we're going to talk about that, is the different people that they have to discuss this, and it's cool seeing heroes of mine like Joe Bob Briggs and Lloyd Kaufman, not so much, but I mean Adam Green they talked to a little bit. I know you're a big fan of his,
Lloyd Kaufman was fun to watch, actually.
Oh yeah, and honestly, he said some things I was really surprised by.
Yeah,
he's like, just let them watch it for free. You have their time. You're taking up their time. I was like, that's a really good point.
The most important asset that they could give you is their time. I agree. And here's the compliment that I will pay. That's perhaps the biggest compliment I could pay a film, and that is that if I ever found someone that was into horror but had not had much experience with cult film, this is something that I would happily give to them and say, here's a little bit of a sort of a minute history on it, a truncated version of it.
Very much so. It grazes over.
but what I would like, what I think would be a good thing about it is that the clips that they do show, some of them are really crazy out there clips that are like, what is this? There's a movie with this in it,
especially with some of the 70s stuff they show.
Yeah, it would really get you, raring to see some of these things. So I think that in and of itself is a tremendous compliment to the film.
Yeah, because I think that first decade where they begin stuff is where you and I, we have the least amount of knowledge, probably, is some of that sleaze cinema that they showed a little bit of, because obviously that sort of stuff was, I feel like the art form was elevated, but made I don't know, in the 80s at least, maybe it was more acceptable, and it did become a little mainstream at times, if you're seeing super violent X-rated stuff that had to be trimmed down like RoboCop or, whatever else, so.
Now, one thing I did want to hit on was, while it was competently put together and presented, there were a couple of issues I had. Like, sometimes there was dead silence underneath some of the speakers, and then sometimes they had music that made it way more engaging. So I don't know quite what the decision making was there. Like, no one really said anything that was so deep and insightful that it necessitated dropping out music entirely. So I thought that was kind of a weird choice. But outside of that, the only thing I kept noticing was the fact that every time someone popped up, they'd put their name back up on screen. I'm like, I thought you just do it like once and then maybe remind them again in a few minutes. Not literally every time they pop back up on screen, and maybe they didn't, but that's what it felt like.
No, they did do it every time, but the one thing that I took note of after they started doing it a few times is I was like, oh, they're actually changing the film credit each time they're showing this person's name.
Yeah, they are changing.
Which was
different
one,
movie.
which I'm guessing was really the reason why they did it, is because they wanted to show the extent of the body of work for why this person's opinion and experience within, genre filmmaking or critiquing or fandom or whatever was important to put forth. So,
yeah, no, that could be. I could definitely see that.
That's my guesstimation.
So, all right.
I mean, not much effects-wise or anything, because once again, it's just clips of movies. Some not so violent or weird or whatever, and others really went for it. This is an R-rated documentary, or unrated, I guess, is what it would probably boil down to.
Yeah. Well,
or not rated or whatever, you know.
Some of the stuff they have in there is definitely
pretty racy, man.
If it does get released somehow.
And
but
there's that some of that super sleaze our buddy Luini loves so much, man.
Yeah, he would have liked that movie. And I did recommend it to our friends over at Cult Film Video.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's hopefully a lot of other people are going to be able to enjoy this and appreciate it on the level that we did, at least, if not more so. So
I can see this showing up on like Shudder or
absolutely.
one of the streaming services, hopefully, so that more people can actually get the chance to check it out, because it was an Indiegogo, and I'm not sure what sort of physical release or whatever is ever going to become available for the public beyond that. So
But yeah, there you go, guys. We'll go ahead and leave it at that and let you guys wait and discover it as soon as you can. And again, as of right now, there's no way for you to see it outside of festival circuits, so maybe check into it and see if there's a website and find if there's a festival near you playing it soon.
Yeah, or social media of some sort to follow for it. I'm sure just Google Survival of the Film Freaks and you will definitely be able to find some information.
It's dope. They have a poster that's basically a parody of the Maniac, the original Maniac poster.
They
it's
do.
Really cool.
It's dope.
So yeah, thank you guys very much for watching. Thank you once again to Monty from the International Horror and Sci-Fi Film Festival, and Patrick from Allied, and of course Jason from the Phoenix Film Festival. All of you guys allow us to come and cover these movies every year, and of course the lovely Harkins out here in Scottsdale, Arizona.
Say thank you.
Very much so. Until next time, I've been Cecil Laird.
Gracias a Jaime and Fuego.
And remember,
stay scared.